All right, what's up, YouTube? Let's give this a shot here. All right, looks like we're live. Just make sure the sound's okay. Check 1, 2. Okay. It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a beautiful Monday afternoon. It is officially spring. Well, is it? I don't know if it's meteorological spring or not, but it feels like it. It's almost 70 degrees outside. The sun feels warm to the touch. The Big Ten tournament is looming. Illinois gets the 7th seed. Not bad, all things considered, how a lot of the season has went. And an opportunity, I think, on their side of the bracket to maybe do something with it. Now, it has been a crazy regular season, and before I got into the Big Ten tournament, wanted to try to contextualize what this season has been so far, because it is fair to say that at the end of the day, you essentially got the record that Ken Pom predicted that you would. Ken Pom being the analytics website. They said before the season 21-10, 12-8 in the Big Ten. Well, sure enough, 21-10, 12-8 in the Big Ten. There are a lot of unknowns, of course, going into this season, and so much of that projection was based on what could happen and not what some of these guys have done in college before, because a KJ and a Tomislav Ivicic and a Morez Johnson, Will Riley hadn't played at this level. If we were to grade the regular season, I was pondering this earlier today and thinking, what letter grade would I give it? And as topsy-turvy as it's been, I don't think you could certainly go beneath a B-. I mean, I feel like going anywhere in the C range would be far too grading on a very, very difficult curve that I don't think is fair. And we certainly wouldn't go A, because there's been enough tumultuous parts of the season where it's kind of hard to say how much of that is maybe due to Brad Underwood, how much of that is due to external factors. But I'm settling right around the B mark, because at the end of the day, this team played a very, very tough schedule, and I think they deserve credit for that. They have as many quad one wins, I think, as anybody in the country, and as many quad one games as anyone in the country. So it would only be fair to give them props for the fact that they finished with another 20-win season and another winning season in the Big Ten and another NCAA tournament bid with all these new faces. It's been the journey that has been somewhat, I don't know, destabilizing. I mean, we've felt like we've been on our toes, I think, as fans of this team for so much of this year because, well, frankly, we have been. A lot of this season and a lot of what we've seen from this team has been, well, for lack of a better word, inconsistent. And while some of that inconsistency was to be expected, it was the fact that the peaks were so high and the valleys were so low that you get a sense of whiplash. Now, I have been, I think rightly, called someone that kind of rides that roller coaster, and I do ride that roller coaster. There's no doubt about that. But this season, more than many of them, has had a very roller coaster kind of vibe to it. And now that we've made it past the regular season with single elimination postseason tournaments ahead, it's been kind of nice to take a breath and just say, okay, that was a good season. Now, mileage may vary as far as how enjoyable you found it, how taxing you found it. The weird dichotomy with this season is that on one hand, this was topsy-turvy, up and down, whiplash. You should be exhausted by the end of it. But on the other hand, so many of these guys haven't been here more than one season, so it's difficult to have that same emotional investment. I think that's probably saved us a little bit of anger. And I know that some of my reactions have been characterized as anger. I've been frustrated at parts of this season, and I've been annoyed at others. It's only been maybe once or twice where I've been full-on angry with what I saw or what I perceive to be a lack of adjustments. It's been a weird level of detachment for me, and yet The good news is, as I found out Friday night when I was at State Farm Center, oh, guess what? When they win a big game, that feels as good as any team that has won a big game for Illinois. Well, maybe not quite as like good as 0405, but I think what we found out this year and last year and what we're finding out through the Underwood era, yes, the faces are changing on a pretty regular basis, and that's not just Illinois, but many schools. And yes, it might be harder to latch on to those teams at certain points in the season. But the roots that we have rooting for this program run deep enough where we're going to find some hook into it. And I certainly have. And as we enter Big Ten tournament play and NCAA tournament play after that, I'm into it. I'm ready to go. I'm excited to see what this team ultimately does when the season could end at basically any moment. I mean, we sit here today on March 10th, and we could have 2 more games, or we could have 10. I mean, the variance is crazy, but you could literally go from 2 potential games all the way to 10 if you won the Big Ten tournament, made the national championship. I do not foresee one or either of those things necessarily happening, but I'm intrigued enough to think, okay, as we get to Indy this weekend, and as we find out the pairings on Sunday and figure out what bracket you're in, there's at least some intrigue in terms of, okay, what are the matchups, and can this team go on a bit of a run? They're on a bit of a mini run right now. I think it's fair to call that the last 3 games. Purdue was maybe not a clean 40 minutes by some standards, but the way they closed that game I thought was impressive enough, notwithstanding the first 35 minutes where you just kind of hung tough despite not maybe playing your best game up to that point. But the Michigan win and the Iowa win. I mean, Iowa gets in the Big Ten tournament because they're playing good ball right now, except for when they came down to Champaign. This team, when they're on, is a good team. They finished the regular season ranked 24th in the rankings. I mean, that counts for something. And why I think this is firmly a B grade. If you want to say B minus because of your frustrations with Underwood, I'm okay with that because I've had frustrations too. I still have questions going into this postseason and going into the offseason about when push comes to shove in a close game, is he going to be adept enough to make that necessary change to help you win it? I will say, while it but probably took a little bit longer than it should have against Purdue to make that adjustment on Kaufman-Renn, he did. And I thought the rotations in the second half, especially playing Benham-Rickhouse more, which I know sounds like, well, what are we talking about? Playing Benham-Rickhouse more, when's that ever a good idea? It was Friday night. It was things like that where I saw a coach coaching the game in front of him. And if you can get that paired with a team that clearly has a lot of confidence right now, then what the heck? Shoot your shot in Indy, shoot your shot wherever the NCAA tournament landing spot may be, and hopefully we are doing plenty of garage pods well into the month of March. So today we're going to talk about the Big Ten tournament. It's one of my favorite parts of the basketball season. I've always loved the Big Ten tournament. It is not a throwaway thing for me. I've had some of my best memories as an Illini fan watching the Big Ten tournament. So we're going to talk all about the matchups ahead and hopefully what is a long weekend in Indy. Before I get too far ahead of myself, got to remind you the 200 level is brought to you by DPDO. Geez, old habits die hard. I apologize to Steve and the DPDO staff, but also to Nathan and Hamilton Walkers, which we've really appreciated them hopping on the podcast. Primary sponsors for us this year and hopefully into the future. Went there just a couple weeks ago for a date night with my wife. It's a great date night spot with you and your partner. It's also a great pre- or post-game spot. And I know there's not any State Farm Center games ahead, but here's the deal. If you go to the bar at Hamilton Walkers, they got a few TVs in there. So you could go during the Big Ten or NCAA tournaments, get a drink, get an appetizer, get a steak while you're there. I plan on getting a light dinner when I was there, and I said, no, I got to get some steak. I'm at freaking Hamilton Walkers. I'm glad I did. So Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits. Really appreciate them and their support this year. Also got to thank Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. They have this amazing deal going on where if you get a new HVAC system, they will give you a free hot water heater. On top of that, expert service technicians that will come in, get everything hooked up for you. And hey, you know how warm it is outside right now. It is probably time to get that AC check scheduled as well. So that is Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend at 217-841-4728. Also, got to thank State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. For life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. And finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. Got to thank Luke and his staff. I know Luke is pretty pumped for the postseason ahead. Big Illini fan. They work year-round, but this is especially that time of year where the home projects, you got something on your mind, go ahead and get it booked now with Owen Builders at owenbuildersllc.com. Hey, it is March after all. If you haven't already, 200-level book is available on Amazon in all formats. If you're local, you can go to Jane Addams Bookstore in downtown Champaign, or either Game Day Spirit location, I believe, has a few copies left as well. And Champagne Showers Podcast Network. After all those formalities, I need a quick drink of water here. There we go. Now, reflecting on the Big Ten tournament, some of the most fun I had when writing this book was reflecting on Big Ten tournaments past. And I'll start with the most memorable one, which to me was 1999. And there were a few weekends I remember as vividly as that one for a team that was the 11 seed in the Big Ten tournament. This was the down year for Lon Kruger, but we knew that reinforcements were coming with Frank and Brian Cook and Marcus Griffin. So it was a little bit easier to swallow knowing that, yes, Corey Bradford, Big Ten Freshman of the Year, you got him. You got some supporting pieces. The studs are coming in next year. The cavalry is on its way. So we enter the Big Ten tournament in 1999, and I vividly remember as the 11th seed, we must have played 6 seed Minnesota. I believe that's how it shook out on Thursday night. And this happened to be, just like this Thursday, parent-teacher conferences. They always seem to land on the Big Ten tournament. And I went in. I was at Urbana Middle School at the time. I guess I would have been a 7th grader. And went in, you know, got the positive marks. I was a good student. And went home and turned on the game. Ho-hum, 11 seed Illinois. They're looking okay against Minnesota. Don't think too much of it. I mean, they got the upset, and Minnesota, despite being okay then, this is Clem Haskins' era, never really struck the fear of God into you. So, okay, you live to see another day, you play on Friday. Great. For me, spring break had started. Got the parent-teacher conferences out of the way, so that Friday, a friend of mine, Adam, he had some of us over for a sleepover. So we went over to his place. He lived in the neighborhood next over. And we played Bob Knight's Indiana team. I think if this is 1999, you're probably looking at the early days of, I mean, was Kirk Aston a freshman on that team, or was Tom Coverdale a freshman? Probably a few others that I'm forgetting at the moment. Pre-Jared Jeffries, I know that. But it was a pretty hotly contested game. You ended up winning that as well. Okay, now we're playing Saturday, the Big Ten tournament. Keep in mind, this is a year after Big Ten champion Illinois lost to Purdue on that Saturday. So it felt like this early going of the Big Ten tournament that Illinois didn't have a whole lot of footing that weekend. Granted, I think it was only the 3rd tournament ever, but we hadn't ever made it to the championship game. Okay, Saturday, get into that, and you play Ohio State. Famously, the Michael Redd and the Scooney Penn and the Ken Johnson, really good Ohio State team that ended up making the Final Four maybe that year or the next year. And I remember watching this with some neighbor friends of ours that we've watched countless Illini games with over at their house. So, I mean, 3 separate games, 3 separate locations that I watched it. Superstition was not playing a role. We were just enjoying the ride wherever we did watch it. And after this Ohio State game, my dad and I, for some reason, went to CVS, or what was then Osco. I don't know if it was for snacks or for him to get some more beer or what. Like, we ended up hanging out with the neighborhood crew, I think, a little bit after that, too. And I just remember feeling, like, blissfully happy that Illinois was making this surprising run. We knew it loomed the next day with Michigan State, but it was just an intoxicating run, and it was such a table setter for what happened next year. I still look back so fondly on that weekend, despite getting crushed by Michigan State on Sunday, which we kind of expected. And I guess what? This is 99 Big Ten tournament. This Michigan State team went to the Final Four. They were a year away from winning it all, but they were already a juggernaut. So that, to me, will always be a special Big Ten tournament memory. But I got to be honest, the ones with Underwood have been very, very memorable for different reasons. I think that the 2021 Big Ten tournament run, okay, so you won in 03, you won in 05. 03, got second place in the regular season, and then Brian Cook and all the freshmen, they take you to the Big Ten tournament crown. Deserving for him and Sean Harrington on their way out. Bill Self's last Big Ten tournament. '05, you won. It was kind of like ho-hum because of what had happened against Ohio State the week before, losing that perfect season. But they took care of business. But in 2021, this was after the kerfuffle, with Michigan getting the regular season crown. So there was a little bit of extra juice. And what made it all the more meaningful for me and my family is that this weekend happened to coincide with when my mom had her transplant. And this was, obviously a very kind of tense few days where we spent time up in Chicago as she got the procedure done at Northwestern Memorial. All I packed with me was Illinois stuff. And I think part of that was probably kind of like a safety blanket. We had a good team that was on their way to a number one seed in the tournament. We had a chance to win the Big Ten tournament. And to me, any Illini gear that I had was just made me feel warm and fuzzy, maybe in a time of uncertainty. I'm sure that it was my own version of bringing home with me. So my Kofi jersey, I wore it every single day. I had undershirts that changed, but the jersey never did. And that weekend, smoking Rutgers on Friday night. And then, what would it have been? Oh, boy. Oh, and that's right. We weren't the one seed in the Big Ten tournament. I think we were the two. You smoke Rutgers on Friday night. Awesome game against Iowa on Saturday. Heated rivalry at that point, and you didn't smoke them, but you controlled that game. That was really Andre Curbello's maybe finest moment on the Illini. He was just unstoppable, and everything was just clicking. And then we go into Sunday, and at that point, I drove home. We had been up at Chicago for 4 or 5 days at that point. My parents were going to settle in at a hotel next to the hospital. And at that point, I get back home in time to watch the Big Ten Tournament Championship. And I think maybe because of everything that had transpired and the fact that this Illinois team, we didn't even get to watch them in person because of COVID, there was something particularly cathartic about when they held on and they won in overtime. Georgi Bashanishvili is the reason you even made it to overtime because he was so phenomenal in that second half when a lot of other guys were struggling. And then you get to that second half and you close it out. And I'm pretty sure Andre Curbello had a really good overtime as well. Last year, real quick, back to 2021. Talk about whiplash. You win the game in overtime, and then about 5 minutes later, you're announced as a one seed. And I remember then, right at that moment, the celebration felt so short-lived. And then we saw Loyola's name, and it's almost like a gut feeling I had when that name came across the screen. I would not sit here and say that I predicted Loyola would beat us. That'd be a lie. But I would not be lying if I said I felt like, pit in my stomach. So take that for what it's worth. But the gut check that I had at that moment was not good. Last year, though, I'm not going to call it my favorite, but I think what was really awesome about last year, we started the Garage Pods, and that culminated in that Sunday we had a scheduled podcast over at Poor Brothers. And Isaac and I were over there, took the whole setup, and we set ourselves up with the TV, and we had blank brackets for people to fill out afterwards. And people would have done that even if we had lost that game. But what an awesome basketball game that was against Wisconsin last year. That was really high-level stuff. Chucky Hepburn was just unconscious. And A.J. Storr was still a good basketball player, believe it or not. I know he's not anymore. But it was Terrence Shannon Jr. who just had the best weekend in Big Ten tournament history. Pretty much bar none. Damask was solid after what was kind of an up-and-down tournament. Coleman, from what I recall, was just steady that whole game. And you got the win. I forget if that was a Dane Danger game, which I feel like the Ohio State game on the Friday of that weekend was when Dane kind of went off and gave you a preview of a few things that he would do in the tournament itself. But that was thrilling. And for a team that missed out on the Big Ten regular season title, as it so often happens, they have a little bit more juice going in the Big Ten tournament. Now, this team was not sniffing the Big Ten title. They haven't since third week of January. They just what was not in the cards. It has not been in the cards for the last 6-7 weeks. Okay, fine. You can live with that. And I do think that there is something advantageous, though, about going into this weekend kind of unencumbered. There's not I wouldn't imagine at least any reason for this team to be tight going into this Big Ten tournament. If anything, they should be loose. They should be confident. And it starts on Thursday against either Iowa or Ohio State. Two matchups I like. If I think about the Ohio State game back in late January, when things were starting to get a little bit tenuous, and then you got that win, you had a strong second half. Trey Gibbs' Longhorn went off. I know he's been rendered fairly ineffective recently, but that was a memorable game at a time when it felt like it was super important, and then the real dip began for Illinois. Iowa, on the other hand, if they somehow beat Ohio State, it's hard to be too scared of them given their lack of interior presence. I'm going to get to the listener mailbag here in a second, but to me, this Big Ten tournament, if you win a game, you can't call it a failure. I mean, I think losing to an Ohio State or an Iowa would leave you wanting a little bit, but you play Maryland and it's a tight game and you lose by a couple possessions. Are we going to think any less of this team? I don't think so. I think at this point right now, the team that we're watching, we know is capable of springing upsets. We know that they're capable of beating good teams, and Maryland is a good team. We also have that underlying tension about, okay, now that you are apparently healthy again, because it sounds as if Morez will play this weekend, do you want to expend more than you need to in Indy? And I've been waffling back and forth on this because I love the Big Ten tournament. I love the Big Ten tournament banners. I mean, maybe some schools would scoff at that, but I think conference tournaments are fun. I think they're meaningful, maybe more than some do. I know Tom Izzo has scoffed at it, but he's got 6 Big Ten tournament titles himself. Illinois has 4. That's tied for second. And I think that there's that pride in your place within the conference that still has me wanting to make it to Sunday. I mean, I think about what it is like to wake up on Big Ten Tournament Championship Sunday, and my team's in it. And in my life, that's happened, 6 times, I think. So let me think. I think Illinois is 4-2 in it. Lost in 99 to Michigan State. Won in 2003 with Bill Self's team. Bill Self only made it to the championship game once, I believe. Yeah, that's right. Made it in 05 and won, so that's 2-1. Made it and lost in 08. I don't know if you remember this. This is the Calvin Brock team that wasn't very good and somehow made it to the championship game and got pummeled pretty much by Wisconsin. I think they held you to 40-some points. Par for the course for a Weber team. At that point, you're 2-2, and then you won the last 2. So, yeah, from what I can recall, you're 4-2 in those championship games. And I love those days. I love waking up with that one extra game and knowing you were the lead into the selection show. So I get the argument, and I know Trevor's made it in our group thread, and I know others haven't, and the listener mailbag we'll get to. Why expend more energy than you need to? But if you win a banner of any kind, it is a tangible accomplishment. It goes in the rafters. It's another trophy in the case. Those matter. I truly, and this might sound ridiculous, if the choice were between Big Ten tournament and you lose in the second round of the NCAA tournament, or you lose the Big Ten tournament and make a Sweet 16, I know what the answer is to that. I think we would all agree Sweet 16. But I would stop to think about it for just a second, okay? Of course I'm picking the second weekend of the tournament because I will take that whole week of looking forward to another game and the opportunity, depending on how matchups break out, to get even further. I'm just saying if it were a trade-off, I would pause for a second before making that call. If I were to be told right now that this team bowing out early or just getting a win and then losing to Maryland and getting a full week's rest before the NCAA tournament, if that were to be beneficial for them, okay, I'll take that. I'll accept that and say, bummer we aren't playing Saturday and Sunday, but it's all for the best. It's just you can't guarantee that. So in my mind, when we get to this point of the year, it's always play the game in front of you or play however many games are in front of you. And in this weekend, in this case, this weekend, it could be up to 4. And if we can make it 4, make it 4. And then rest for the few days. These guys are young. And, hopefully get some favorable matchups in the NCAA tournament. But here's the thing. I don't think Illinois is going to win the Big Ten tournament. I'm just not convinced. This is a double negative. I'm not convinced that they won't make it to Sunday. Let me rephrase. I think they can make it to Sunday. And then you shoot your shot against Michigan State, I would presume. I guess on that side of the bracket, Wisconsin could wake up from their stupor. UCLA could make a run. I could definitely see that. On that side of the bracket, Oregon, maybe in a neutral site, they do a little bit better. That top half of the bracket, to me, is pretty tough. But actually, on your side of the bracket, you got Maryland there, and then presumably Purdue on Saturday. But here's the thing. Maryland would be the tough one. We know how tough that matchup is, but you didn't have Tommy back in January. So now that you would presumably have Merez back, you got Benham Rickhouse playing a little bit better post defense, I think. I mean, if anything against Kaufman-Wren, maybe Ben could give you some minutes against Reese. Not Queen, but Reese. And if you get Maryland on a night where they aren't shooting as well and you're hitting 30% from 3 instead of 25, I think that's a game that Vegas would probably have pretty darn close according to the spread, like 2.5, 1.5. It just would be hard for me to imagine them thinking that Maryland is a substantial favorite. So I look at the Purdue game, if that were to be something looming there on Saturday, which I think they'd be the most likely team to make it there, is very winnable. I thought that the absence of Merez against Purdue put you at such a disadvantage. I mean, from this podcast, I have not been one to go down that injury, illness rabbit hole as much because stuff happens, and you got to figure it out. The Merez injury is consequential, and this team found a way to weather that storm the last 3 games. I think if he's guarding Kaufman-Wren, it is a different story. I mean, just to have that extra big body, and then all of a sudden you can slow down that pick and roll game, which they got rolling, and that's why Purdue was able to take a 10-point lead in the second half. That's why they made it a 5-point lead with like 2.5 minutes to go in that game. I mean, think about that. One thing I didn't mention on Friday's podcast was, my mind was swimming in everything that happened in that game and trying to process just how awesome that was. Trey White had an and one that was massive in that game. You were down 5 with 2:30 to go. Trey White gets the and one to make it a 1-possession game. I mean, that made it a game again where if you don't score in that possession, then Purdue could have just iced it. So let's take a look real quick at this bracket and then get to the listener mailbag. The question that I asked people that we'll get to are, what are your expectations for the weekend? But I will let you know right now that my expectation actually is I think Illinois makes it to Sunday. Now, let's start with our side of the bracket, and it would be either, let's see here, Iowa or Ohio State is the team you would face. I'll tell you one thing that I like about this draw. You avoided USC and Rutgers. Maybe USC less so, but Rutgers still has that NBA elite talent that if they were to go off, I wouldn't feel so great about that. But Iowa, Ohio State, I think you could do worse. I really do. And I would say if you lose to either one of those, it is a outright disappointment. That should not happen. Not the way this team is playing. Not a loss that you would want to have going in the tournament. That would be one where it wouldn't be so much, oh, great, we get an extra day's rest. It would be more, uh-oh, was that 3-game win streak a mirage? I do think you'll beat either team. I like either matchup for various reasons, both of which, I mean, they lack interior presence. The thing that really killed you against Purdue for so much of that was Kaufman-Wren got his. Iowa, Ohio State, they don't have that. I think Trey White being at the level that he's at right now is going to be pretty big for either of those opponents, being able to guard wings like he does. Like Devin Royal, for example, I think that Trey is playing at a level right now where he can neutralize that a bit. And then you just hope Colin Boswell, with that defensive adjustment, getting that help on the picks with a big man hedging the screen, will be able to slow Thornton down. Now, Mobley is really good. I just feel like Ohio State, while they present some problems, I think that's quite a winnable game. I think both are. I think Vegas will probably have Illinois as a 5.5, 4.5, 5.5 point favorite against Ohio State. Maybe more substantial if it was Iowa on that Thursday night. Let's say you win, take care of business. Maryland is sitting there waiting, and we know that's a tough matchup. Now, on the bottom side of the bracket, you got the winner of USC and Rutgers facing Purdue. While I think both USC and Rutgers have a couple of really good players on each side, they lack the depth, and they don't have a Braden Smith. They don't have a Kaufman Wren. It'd be difficult for me to imagine Purdue not winning that game and then playing a Michigan team that is just flailing. So let's, I think, reasonably pencil Purdue in for Saturday. The question is, can you get past Maryland? I think if you get past Maryland, you're going to make it to Sunday. And it just, to me, seems like a prime opportunity to, if you want to call it revenge narrative, whatever you want to do for Maryland. I know the matchup isn't great, and yet my gut is saying Illinois wins that. Maybe they don't. Maybe Maryland's our new Penn State, and we just can't beat them. Actually, Maryland is our Maryland. I mean, we have a hard time beating them anyway, but for some reason I'm thinking, the way this Illinois team's playing right now, I could see them beating this Maryland team. In fact, I need to check and see how Maryland's doing right now. I mean, they're all the way up to 13 on KenPom, and they won their last 3 against Penn State by 4, Michigan by 6, Northwestern at home by 13. I mean, their only losses in the last month, Ohio State on the road by 3, Michigan State at home by 3. This is pretty unbelievable, actually. Check this out. Maryland on the year has 7 losses. The largest margin of defeat in any of those games was 6. They do not lose by much. Man, they're a good team. They really are. Yeah, see, Maryland would be favored, and they should be favored in a game like that. I don't know why my gut's saying Illinois would get that second matchup. I don't know. But if we were to be, I think, level-headed about this, winning Thursday and a good game against Maryland, win or lose, the benefit would be, okay, if you lose, you get rested for the tournament, and you show that you can still hang with a really good team. Okay. I mean, I don't think Illini fans lose sleep over that. If you lost substantially, then maybe you'd be more concerned. If you won, well, what the hell? You get to Saturday, play a Purdue team that I think with Morez back, you just match up a little bit better than you did last Friday, and you get that win. Would it be a tight game? Yes. Would it be ulcer-inducing stuff? Of course it would be. But while the revenge narrative would be on Purdue's side for that game, I do think Illinois would have a decent shot. I don't know why my gut's saying Illinois makes it to Sunday. Now, I do think against a deeper Michigan State team, it would suck to lose to them 3 times. I think that Michigan State would be favored. I think they should be favored in that game. I know that there's not this sort of elite talent thing going on with this Michigan State team. They're just really good. I mean, they are greater than the sum of their parts, and that is a credit to Tom Izzo, who I think has done his best coaching job since God knows when. I mean, this team on paper coming into the season was not scary. And if anything, it was, well, what's Izzo doing up there? Well, I guess this is what he's doing, and depending on which bracket they end up in, if they don't end up in Duke or Auburn's bracket, I could see them making a run to the Final Four because they're relentless. So I'm going to make my prediction. I think Illinois makes it to Saturday. I do. We can all point and laugh if they lose to Ohio State or Iowa. I'll wear that, but I don't know. I just think that there is a possibility, a distinct possibility of that. And I just like the way they're playing and that looseness that maybe hurt this team at other points in the year. I think it lends itself well in a single elimination, 1-weekend tournament like this. I think that this is actually a good place to have that mindset of just play ball. They don't have the pressure of, let's say, in Ohio State, they would have to come out and probably win a couple games to get back in the tournament. That's what would have maybe worried me a bit about Nebraska because of the size of their guards and Juwan Gary, Bryce Williams, just guys that you've always had issues with. If they had made this Big Ten tournament, which they didn't, what a choke job, then I would have thought, oh, crap, like they're just going to bring everything. I know Ohio State can do the same thing too, but the same could have been said for last year. Now, it was Terrence Shannon Jr. that led you back in that game. Pretty sure that was one of his 38-point ridiculous performances. Maybe that was a 43-pointer. All right, so here's the listener mailbag question I asked. What are your expectations/predictions for the Illini in this weekend's Big Ten tournament? Going to start with Jacob. Expectation and prediction is winning 2 games, potential to win the Big Ten tournament, but don't expect it. I feel we've turned the corner and just want to keep that mojo going into March Madness while solidifying our 5 or 6 seed in the Big Dance. Thanks, Jacob. From Luke, as in Luke Owen, you know him. Considering Maryland was the worst possible matchup, one win and move on to the tournament. I get why, Luke, we would look at Maryland and say that they are the worst matchup, not just on paper, but from what we saw back in January. Yeah, the question would be, could you slow down those two big men with both Tommy and Merez out there and Ben playing a little bit better post defense? That's the question. I think if you do, it just comes down to how well they're hitting their threes, which they've done pretty well this year. It is a bad matchup. I think that I just have this weird sense of, I think we could get that. Would I have liked Michigan to win against Michigan State and play them again? Yes. But Michigan decided they had to suck ass at the end of the year. They've been terrible. So they fall the way down to 3. From David, if Merez is back and can dust off the cobwebs quickly, I like our chances. And we would need him for sure against Maryland in that second game, as I don't like that matchup. If we can get past the first 2 games, I think we win it. But I can also see us crashing out Thursday. So, shoulder shrug emoji. Yeah, David, that's the thing. I did all that long-winded, well, we can do this, that, or the other. They could lose Thursday. I would, David, however, be concerned if that were the case, because if there is a corner that we hope they've turned, it's not a corner like, oh, we're elite again. It's not that. It's the corner of, okay, they've figured out things that work offensively, which is they're much more attacking towards the basket. They're going inside out. That's working. And defensively, which is specifically they're hedging screens when you get some pick and roll action, a guard's trying to go over. Instead of trailing that guard so hard, you at least have the big help out and slow it down. And that's been immense. I know that Braden Smith picked that apart. I know that Bruce Thornton's a really good point guard. He could do that a little bit for Ohio State. I just feel like this team has figured out enough tweaks where maybe their talent, which is better than Ohio State and better than Iowa and probably comparable to Maryland, and I think better overall than Purdue, despite their 2 elite dudes. And Fletcher Lawyer's good, fine, but I that's actually a good debate. Who's more? I mean, Purdue's not a sexy team by any stretch. They got some talent. I just feel like Illinois. I mean, NBA talent. Illinois has more. College basketball talent. I think it's pretty comparable too. From Ethan, I really want MSU again. Don't care when. That's my only goal. Well, Ethan, it would only be Sunday. He says they won't beat us 3 times. I'd like to think that, Ethan. If we were both playing on the same number of days in a row, I would feel a little bit better about that. I do think for this Illinois team, presuming that they would play a smaller rotation, that fatigue would become a factor against Michigan State that plays a very large rotation. From Evan, my expectation is just to win the first game and then play a hard-fought game against Maryland, win or lose. Anything from there is a bonus. Really just do whatever it takes to cement that 6 seed, which I think 1 win will do. I'm going to roll the dice with my prediction. Let's see, Evan, if I can get this pull up. But I think we win the first against Iowa, not Ohio State. Control majority of the Maryland game and win by 10. Then lose in a close battle versus Purdue in the semis. Purdue beats Wisconsin in the final. What if, Evan, Wisconsin, just like last year, has this random resurgence in the Big Ten tournament? I don't see it. I will say one thing about Michigan State, though. Izzo has made comments about how he doesn't care. Well, I don't want to paraphrase him. He has made comments about how the Big Ten tournament is not his goal, and that's fine. I don't know if many coaches have come out directly and said that. I wonder if he wouldn't ever have his team take games off. He would never do that. I just don't know if it's going to be a point of emphasis for them. They got the Big Ten regular season title considerably. And they're going to end up with, I think, a 3 seed at worst. I mean, to me, they're pretty much locked in on the 3 line based on the strength of the SEC teams getting all of the attention right now. I will pull up the bracket matrix to make sure that I'm being pretty spot on with that. But if I look, oh, my connection's not private. Just go. Come on. I want to see bracket matrix. There we go. Okay. Yeah, Michigan State actually is firmly on the 2 line right now. So worst case, there are 3. I don't know, man. I just don't see Izzo putting a whole lot of emphasis on this. Illinois, by the way, is the highest 7 seed with Mississippi, Missouri, UCLA, and Louisville ahead of them. If Illinois were the highest 7 seed, they play the lowest 2 seed in a second-round matchup, which looks like it would be St. John's. Okay. I dig that. And then if Illinois is the highest 7 seed, they play the worst 10 seed, which would be Arkansas. but probably not because they've already played this year. So Baylor, perhaps? That'd be interesting. Utah State, Vanderbilt. We'll get more into the bracket stuff later this week. Okay, this is from Dave. I'd really love the test of playing Maryland with Merez. If Merez is back Thursday, I'd like him to have 2 to 3 games to get back in the flow. I don't expect them to make it to Sunday, so making it to Saturday would be a big accomplishment going into the tournament. Excellent. Thanks, Dave. I think Illini fans are reasonable. Check this out. No one's saying win or bust. From Nick, I think Illinois will win Thursday to lock up a 6 seed, but will fall to Maryland on Friday. Hope I'm wrong, though. Would love to get to Saturday on CBS. Nick, there is something about semifinal Saturday, CBS. I know that Jim Nance is done, I think. So Ian Eagle, who's really good, and he's still got Bill Raftery. So, yeah, there's something about that, Nick, that just it feels good to be one of the last 4 teams in the Big Ten tournament. Often we play well on those Saturdays, too. From Josh, Iowa and Ohio State should be a good matchup if Iowa is knocking down shots. I think Ohio State will come away with the win as long as Thornton plays well. We can beat either one, especially Iowa, without Freeman. Love another shot at Michigan, just to set the record straight since they've owned us. I think, Josh, you mean Maryland. Okay, Maryland in this case. They certainly have owned us. It's been frustrating, Josh. From Teddy, it depends on Merez's health and what he can give. Full and healthy, I truly think we could win out this weekend. The top Big Ten teams aren't that good. Plus, I want revenge against Maryland. Willard's comments about white European players felt like a subtle shot about our guys. Not sure where that quote is, Teddy. I'll have to look that up. But Willard just seems like an angry fella. I don't know. I don't like the cut of his jib. From Illini Gurley, would love to see Maryland again to test how we can match up against teams like that in the NCAA tournament. If we beat them, we should want the MSU test. Let's see what we're made of when we're healthy. Nice. Thanks, Gurley. Illini Gurley, that is. From Aaron, 1 win and likely done against Maryland. Maryland is the worst matchup for the Illini in the Big Ten. Maryland with a good 4-5, which are the positions the Illini struggle to guard regardless of who is playing. That's fair, Aaron. I mean, it has been an issue for this team. We're lucky that Purdue doesn't really have a legit 5 this year. I mean, Kaufman Wren is a 4. He sometimes plays the 5. He's not a great defender, so we were still able to attack the rim pretty well, but he got his offensively. Well, you're basically got 2 of those with Maryland. That's where Merez would be essential if you're going to win that game. From Jonah, get through Iowa, Ohio State, get Merez back, and win a tough one against Maryland, but fall short against Purdue, looking for revenge. From Tyler, I expect us to win our first game, and then after that, it's a toss-up. Big Ten tournament is fun, and you always want to win, but in reality, the only thing that matters now is the big dance. We'll have to get Merez back and have this team fully healthy for the postseason. So that's the debate, everybody, right? Is do you watch these games with a let's win them all, or if we lose, who cares? I mean, and I would understand that argument because the NCAA tournament is what people will remember. If this team can somehow finagle their way to a second weekend, point blank, let's just get it out there. That's a successful year. It just is. It would have been a successful year even if this team had a better regular season. You know, making the second weekend is a huge thing off the back. To do it 2 years in a row, I think would really kill any notion that Brad Underwood doesn't win in March. I think this team also, compared to, let's say, 2022 and 2023, is peaking at the right time. 2022, when they won the Big Ten title, they won on the last day thanks to Nebraska winning at Wisconsin. You took care of business against Iowa at home. That team, without Grandison healthy, with Trent having pink eye, I think, by the end of that year, it was, okay, listen, you won the Big Ten title. We appreciate it. Okay, we move on. 2023, that team was dead going to the tournament. We all kind of knew that, and we were affirmed of that idea pretty early in the game against Arkansas in the NCAA tournament. I don't feel that way about this team. It's almost like they went through the ultimate ringer, and it is hard not to think that maybe if they were able to make it through all of that, why the heck not make a bit of a run here? So whether that's this weekend or next weekend or both, I don't know. It's nice to be in this spot. I mean, I have said many times, and I stand by the criticisms I had of Brad Underwood during the valley of late January and through mid-February. I mean, that was a rough stretch that raised a lot of questions that I didn't hope to have to ask. And to his credit and to this team's credit, not only have they dug themselves out of it, but they've done so kind of in style. I mean, the Purdue game was 35 minutes of tough sledding, and that team refused to go away, to their credit, And then they made play after play down the stretch, not just making shots, but really good stops on defense, which showed a mental toughness that I've questioned about this team. And Michigan game was just pure basketball sex, pretty much. I mean, they were just moving the ball however they wanted to on offense, and they just everything just worked against Michigan. And it was one of those games where it's just a beautiful sight, and 5 minutes in the second half, come on, they aren't even in our league today, and they weren't. And Iowa, somewhat the same thing, though that Iowa team is lean, though they are playing decent ball. And that's why if you were to ask me, who are you going to play on Friday? I don't know why I get the feeling or Thursday. I feel like Iowa's going to beat Ohio State. Just look at how our team is playing going into it. Iowa, again, could have folded the tent a while ago. When Freeman went out, they've had a lot of struggles this year, and their record speaks to that. But for them to go into an equally, if not more desperate Nebraska team, get that win. And let me just make sure I get this right about Iowa, that they're actually playing pretty well down the stretch. Well, no, they aren't. What am I talking about? But it's not like Ohio State is killing it either. Ohio State, according to Ken Pom, is a 5-point favorite on Saturday. And I look at they've lost 4 of 6, including a 21-point loss at home to Northwestern. I don't even know. What was Ohio State doing just hiring Jake Diebler? What was the notion behind that? You just hire the interim guy because he almost made a tournament last year? I don't. Whatever. Hey, that's their prerogative. I call it a hunch. I think Iowa wins Thursday. I don't know. Wednesday, and then you play them Thursday. I love that matchup, especially with Merez back. And I feel like you could really impose your will offensively, and then just do what you did when they were here, which is keep Sanford and who's the other guy that's pretty good? Oh, God. Other white guy that can shoot. It's Iowa. Who cares? I like that matchup. I think that's what will happen. Regardless, to me, it's a successful weekend if you just make it to Friday. Well, let me rephrase. It is not a failure as long as you just make it to Friday. I'm not going to be thinking any less of this team if they just get the first win and make it to Friday. The question of what success looks like, I think, comes down to how you would perform against Maryland in that game. And if you were to get a win, we are talking unqualified success. That's another quad 1 victory that you would get there. So that would certainly solidify you on the 6th line. Maybe you start talking 5 if you make it to Sunday. But it seems like a win and a competitive game against Maryland will find you 6 seed and worst case 7. I think that's fair. Not a bad place to be, all things considered. So again, credit this team for keeping themselves afloat when I thought the thing was maybe sinking. All right, got to get out of here. Appreciate you guys listening or watching. If YouTube, before you leave, just make sure you give the thumbs up and like the video on your way out. Got to thank Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits, State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com, and Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. When you get a new HVAC system from them, you will also get a free hot water heater. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. Quick reminder, the 200 Level book is available on Amazon in all formats. It's available in hardcover and paperback at Jane Addams Bookstore in Champaign, and some copies left at Game Day Spirit locations as well. Just a quick heads up for this week. Thursday, no pod. Parent-teacher conference night. So please win Thursday. So Friday can set up in the garage for a garage pod. If they make it to Saturday, no live pod because I'll be in the air down to visit a buddy in Austin. With Southwest Wi-Fi, I will be watching the game. If they make it to Saturday, I'll be watching the game on my phone. And then that night at the hotel, I'd knock out a podcast. And then hopefully we find ourselves in the championship on Sunday, at which point we'd figure something out. So it's that time of year where I even told my wife, her parents are coming down next weekend. And I said, hey, I'm around. TV's going to be on and basketball's playing all weekend. That's all I got. Everything else is just sort of, I don't know when Illinois is going to play. When they do, that 2-hour thing is blocked off. I hope there are many of those to come because this truly is the best time of year. As a sports fan, I love it. I feel very grateful that we are back in a position of making tournaments regularly. This would be, if you don't count COVID, well, if COVID hadn't happened, the 6th tournament in a row that Brad Underwood has made. And if you would have told me on the day that you hired him that would be the reality, I would have signed up for that a million times over. That's a good place to be. So don't mistake any criticisms I have for him as, ugh, I don't enjoy this. I enjoy the hell out of it. There's been some tough moments this year, no doubt, but I am enjoying the reality of where our basketball program is at macro. And you're at an advantageous position where you can tweak and tune up and figure some things out. That long laundry list of things to fix that I worried about 2 weeks ago, it's shortening with each good performance because it's signaling that maybe not all is in fact amiss, and that maybe there are, as we all kind of knew, a lot of good things that Brad Underwood does. And one of those is the fact that we can enter a weekend like this with some good teams ahead of us and think, we could win this. Whereas, hey, sure, with John Gross, I don't know. Did he feel good about winning any game in the Big Ten tournament? Did he ever make it to Saturday? I don't think he did. So, yes, trust me, I'm well aware of the context about where we're at. I appreciate it, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy sharing it with all of you and talking with you through all this. I hope we have many more podcasts before we have to hit the off season and all the portal talk. Let's enjoy as many games as we possibly can until the end of the year. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you Friday, I hope, for a Garage Pod, fingers crossed. Until then, enjoy the first couple rounds of the Big Ten tournament, and again, hope to see you on Friday evening. It is the 200 level. All right, YouTube, appreciate you tuning in, and have a good rest of your week. Hopefully, see you Friday.